Chapter 13, Part 1 of Fanny Herself. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fanny Herself by Edna Ferber. Chapter 13. From now on, Fanny Brandeis's life became such a swift-flowing thing that your trilogist would have regarded her with disgust. Here was no slow unfolding, petal by petal. Here were two processes going on side by side. Fanny, the woman of business, flourished and throve like a weed, arrogantly flaunting its head above the timid white flower that lay close to the soil and crept and spread and multiplied. Between the two, the fight went on silently. Fate or chance, or whatever it is that directs our movements, was forever throwing tragic or comic little life groups in her path, and then pointing an arresting finger at her, implying, "This means you." Fanny stepped over those obstructions, or walked around them, or stared straight through them. She had told herself that she would observe the first anniversary of her mother's death with none of those ancient customs by which your pious Jew honors his dead. There would be no Yahrzeit light burning for 24 hours. She would not go to temple for Kaddish prayer. But the thing was too strong for her, too anciently inbred. Her ancestors would have lighted a candle, or an oil lamp. Fanny, coming home at 6, found herself turning on the shaded electric lamp in her hall. She went through to the kitchen. "Princess, when you come in tomorrow morning you'll find a light in the hall. Don't turn it off until tomorrow evening at 6. "All day long, Miss Fan? My sakes, what fo'?" "It's just a religious custom." "Didn't know yo' had no religion, Miss Fan. Leastways, I never could figure." "I haven't," said Fanny shortly. "Dinner ready soon, Princess? I'm starved." She had entered a Jewish house of worship only once in this year. It was the stately, white-columned edifice on Grand Boulevard that housed the congregation presided over by the famous Kirsch. She had heard of him, naturally. She was there out of curiosity, like any other newcomer to Chicago. The beauty of the auditorium enchanted her. A magnificently proportioned room, and restful without being in the least gloomy. Then she had been interested in the congregation as it rustled in. She thought she had never seen so many modishly gowned women in one room in all her life. The men were sleekly broadcloth, but they lacked the well-dressed air, somehow. The women were slimly elegant in tailored suits and furs. They all looked as if they had been turned out by the same tailor. An artist in his line, but of limited imagination. Dr. Kirsch, sociologist and savant, aquiline, semi-bald, grimly satiric, sat in his splendid high-backed chair, surveying his silken flock through half-closed lids. He looked tired and rather ill, Fanny thought, but distinctly a personage. She wondered if he held them or they him. That recalled to her the little Winnebago temple and Rabbi Thalmann. She remembered the frequent rudeness and open inattention of that congregation. No doubt Mrs. Nathan Pereles had her counterpart here, and the hypocritical Bella Weinberg, too, and the giggling Aarons girls, and old Ben Reitman. Here Dr. Kirsch had risen, and coming forward, had paused to lean over his desk, and, with an awful geniality, had looked down upon two rustling, exquisitely gowned latecomers. They sank into their seats, cowed. Fanny grinned. He began his lecture, something about modern politics. Fanny was fascinated and resentful by turns. His brilliant satire probed, cut, jabbed like a surgeon's scalpel, or he railed, scolded, snarled like a dyspeptic schoolmaster. Often he was in wretched taste. He mimicked, postured, sneered. But he had this millionaire congregation of his in hand. Fanny found herself smiling up at him delightedly. Perhaps this wasn't religion, as she had been taught to look upon it, but it certainly was tonic. She told herself that she would have come to the same conclusion if Kirsch had occupied a Methodist pulpit. There were no Kaddish prayers in Kirsch's temple. On the Friday following the first anniversary of Molly Brandeis's death, Fanny did not go home after working hours, but took a bite of supper in a neighborhood restaurant. Then she found her way to one of the Orthodox Russian Jewish synagogues on the west side. It was a dim, odorous, bare little place, this house of worship. Fanny had never seen one like it before. She was herded up into the gallery where the women sat, and when the patriarchal rabbi began to intone the prayer for the dead, Fanny threw the gallery into wide panic by rising for it, a thing that no woman is allowed to do in an Orthodox Jewish church. She stood calmly, though the beshawled woman to right and left of her yanked at her coat. In January, Fanny discovered New York. She went as selector for her department. Hereafter Slosson would only do the actual buying. Styles, prices, and materials would be decided by her. Ella Monahan accompanied her, it being the time for her monthly trip. Fanny openly envied her knowledge of New York's wholesale district. Ella offered to help. "No," Fanny had replied, "I think not, thanks. You've your own work. And besides, I know pretty well what I want, and where to go to get it. It's making them give it to me that will be hard." They went to the same hotel and took connecting rooms. Each went her own way, not seeing the other from morning until night, but they often found kimonoed comfort in each other's presence. Fanny had spent weeks outlining her plan of attack. She had determined to retain the cheap grades, but to add a finer line as well. She recalled those lace-bedecked bundles that the farmer women and mill hands had borne so tenderly in their arms. Here was one direction in which they allowed extravagance free rein. As a canny businesswoman, she would trade on her knowledge of their weakness. A Haynes Cooper order is never a thing to be despised by a wholesaler. Fanny, knowing this, had made up her mind to go straight to Horn & Udell. Now Horn & Udell are responsible for the bloomers your small daughter wears under her play frock, in place of the troublesome and extravagant petticoat of the old days. It was they who introduced smocked pinafores to you, and those modish patent leather belts for children at which your grandmothers would have raised horrified hands. They taught you that an inch of hand embroidery is worth a yard of cheap lace. And as for style, cut, line, you can tell a Horn & Udell child from among a flock of 30. Fanny, entering their office, felt much as Molly Brandeis had felt that January many, many years before, when she had made that first terrifying trip to the Chicago market. The engagement had been made days before. Fanny never knew the shock that her youthful, expectant face gave old Sid Udell. He turned from his desk to greet her, his polite smile of greeting giving way to a look of bewilderment. "But you are not the buyer, are you, Miss Brandeis?" "No, Mr. Slosson buys." "I thought so." "But I select for my entire department. I decide on our styles, materials, and prices, 6 months in advance. Then Mr. Slosson does the actual bulk buying." "Something newfangled?" inquired Sid Udell. "Of course, we've never sold much to you people. Our stuff is—" "Yes, I know. But you'd like to, wouldn't you?" "Our class of goods isn't exactly suited to your wants." "Yes, it is, exactly. That's why I'm here. We'll be doing a business of $1.25 million in my department in another 2 years. No firm, not even Horn & Udell, can afford to ignore an account like that." Sid Udell smiled a little. "You've made up your mind to that $1.25 million, young lady?" "Yes." "Well, I've dealt with buyers for a quarter of a century or more, and I'd say that you're going to get it." Whereupon Fanny began to talk. 10 minutes later Udell interrupted her to summon Horn, whose domain was the factory. Horn came, was introduced, looked doubtful. Fanny had statistics. Fanny had arguments. She had determination. "And what we want," she went on in her quiet, assured way, "is style. The Horn & Udell clothes have chic. Now material can't be imitated successfully, but style can. Our goods lack just that. I could copy any model you have, turn the idea over to a cheap manufacturer, and get 1 million just like it at 1/5 the price. That isn't a threat. It's just a business statement that you know to be true. I can sketch from memory anything I've seen once. What I want to know is this. Will you make it necessary for me to do that, or will you undertake to furnish us with cheaper copies of your high-priced designs? We could use your entire output. I know the small-town woman of the poorer class, and I know she'll wear a shawl in order to give her child a cloth coat with fancy buttons and a velvet collar." And Horn & Udell, whose attitude at first had been that of 2 seasoned business men dealing with a precocious child, found themselves quoting prices to her, shipments, materials, quality, quantities. Then came the question of time. "We'll get out a special catalog for the summer," Fanny said. "A small one to start them our way. Then the big fall catalog will contain the entire line." "That doesn't give us time!" exclaimed both men in a breath. "But you must manage somehow. Can't you speed up the workroom? Put on extra hands? It's worth it." They might, under normal conditions. But there was this strike talk, its ugly head bobbing up in 100 places, and their goods were the kind that required high-class workers. Their girls